So I'm Alex, I'm from Primer Labs, and I'm here to talk about the combination of artificial intelligence and intelligence amplification. And I'm specifically talking about autocatalytic artificial intelligence and intelligence amplification symbiosis. And the question that this raises, which I'm actually wanting to know what you guys think of it because the implications are kind of scaring me, is what will happen when we make machines that make us to make them and they make us into them. There's kind of three different Moore's laws of accelerating returns that are involved. There's three uncanny valleys that are being crossed. There's sort of a coming of age story for humanity and for different technologies. There's two different species involved, and there's a number of high stakes questions that arise. Now, first of all, what an autocatalytic reaction is. One of the best known examples of an autocatalytic reaction is life. An autocatalytic reaction is a reaction where the products of the reaction are the catalysts. So as the reaction progresses, it only accelerates the reaction and increases the rate of reaction. And many autocatalytic reactions are very slow at first. And so we could be right in the middle of one of these. And unlike a viral curve where it spreads overnight, we might not even notice this as it ramps up. And there are two specific A's and B's that I'm going to talk about that I think are autocatalyzing right now. The first is strong AI, which we could say, well, we don't have strong AI yet, but we definitely have people that are aiming at it. There's two kinds of aiming at AI. One is saying, well, we're going to have machines that will learn things. And the other is saying, well, we're going to have machines that will learn much more than just a few narrow things. They're going to become like us. And we all know that there's one way of predicting when this might be possible, which is hardware. We have the growth of computing accelerating. But one of the things that we don't know with this graph is when the software will exist to actually exploit this hardware theoretical capability. And so a lot of people are projecting that the challenge arises not in the predictable rise of the hardware, but the unpredictable solving of these software challenges. And one of the reasons that the whole Humanity Plus project and the Singularity project has difficulty solving some of these problems is although there is a ton of money being thrown at certain forms of AI, if there are military AIs or other forms of AI that really do have a narrow purpose, even if they're called AGIs, they're not necessarily the kinds of AIs that we would like or that are going to be like us. And there's, everyone has this slide in every AI talk about how it could go. The Terminator possibility or the unfriendly AI outcome is one where it is a military AI, and it's not something that we look forward to. And it's basically the story of, two species that don't get along. And either way, we kind of see AI, even if it is not friendly to us, as the next logical step. Ghost in the Shell raised the showdown between us and our creation and suggested that merging or getting out of the way is inevitable. But there's a friendly AI hypothesis which says, not only could AI not kill us, but it could become us. And if we actually merge with our technology and become family instead of competition with each other, it could lead to some really cool outcomes that a lot of us in the Humanity Plus movement are looking forward to. And that leads directly into the second thing that I think is autocatalyzing, and that is strong intelligence amplification. So we are all intelligence amplification users. Every information technology is intelligence amplification. The internet, everything that we use to learn and grow is intelligence amplification. But there's a difference between having some technologies which maybe make us a little smarter, like being able to Google an answer, and having a complete redefinition of the way that humans' brains are shaped and grow. And there's one really profound vision which has gathered, I think, the most momentum and focus on this idea, and that is The Diamond Age by Neal Stephenson. And in The Diamond Age, Stephenson posits that the MakerBot, the rise of molecular manufacturing, so we could say Earl Grey hot, which is right now at hand, in the lobby in a very limited form, but still we're headed towards that goal. Nanotech and making things for free might lead us, as we're accustomed to thinking, towards Earl Grey hot Star Trek utopia, because they don't have to compete for stuff. Jean-Luc Picard is asked in one of the Star Trek movies, how much does this ship cost? He says, well, we no longer use money. Instead, we work to better ourselves and the rest of humanity. And before the girl can ask him how that works, the Borg attack, because they just sort of gloss over the answer of how that would actually look. And we now know that this may not lead to Star Trek, and that we could have MakerBots and not have utopia. And the Diamond Age points at one very specific reason why, which is that if you can make anything, people might not make Earl Grey and appreciate the finer things in life. They might go Brave New World or Fahrenheit 451-like into complete spoiled brat mode. And so the idea in the Diamond Age is that people split into kind of two types of people. There's your thetes, which is an old Greek term. If you know, they're your rowers and your laborers. And they're considered kind of like 3/4 of a person in ancient Greece. And they're the logical conclusion of total relativism and total freedom. A lot of the things that we cherish do in some ways lead towards thete lifestyles where we destroy ourselves. And he posits an alternative to that, which is tribes. And the ultimate tribe in the Diamond Age story are called Neo-Victorians. And the thetes call them Vickies, you know, because they resent them. But the whole idea of tribes is that what really matters in a post-scarcity economic world is not the economics of what you have, it's the intelligence of who you are and who you know and who will trust you. And so the essence of tribalism is building a culture that has a shared striving for excellence and an infrastructure for education that other tribes not only admire but actually seek out to join your tribe, and that makes you the most powerful. And what happens is their schools become their competitive advantage. The ability to produce the smartest people in the world is necessary with nanotech to solve problems like how do you teach, you know, 8th graders nanotechnology. You have to really radically, aggressively approach not only teaching the technology of it, but teaching the cohesion and the manners and the kind of values that will make a society be strong. And the problem is that this has a trap. When you go for a perfect system of education, you might get it. And you know, they say you shouldn't reinvent the wheel unless you can get a round one. Well, if you had a perfectly round, smooth educational path that no one could escape from and that really shaped their minds, you might lead to the kind of conformity which couldn't invent the very technologies that made the nanotech age possible. It might get stuck there with people who are yes men. And so one of the characters sees his granddaughter as falling into this trap and says, not on my watch. And he invents something to make human minds, as well as the nanotech age and the diamond age had made physical matter. And he invents something called the Young Ladies Illustrated Primer, because they speak properly in the Neo-Victorian file. And the illustrated primer exists to solve the problem, which is that how do you, on a mass scale, shape each individual person not to be the same, but to be free. Making stuff cheap and free in physical goods is easy, but making a person independent and free is a bigger challenge. And the approach that is taken is a fairy tale book. The child is given the book, they open the book, and it unfolds for them an opportunity to decide who they're going to be. It's personalized to them. And this book, the primer, actually leads to the bigger question, which is once you've got the mind just wide open and you can put almost anything into there, how should you make the mind? What should you give them as content? And the overarching value that Stevenson emphasizes is that, so the Neo-Victorians, you know, they embody conformity, and the thetes embody nonconformity. But to teach someone to be subversive with these extremes, you have to teach them something other than those extremes. You have to teach them subtlety. And so this is a very elusive thing to teach, but it is potentially the biggest challenge that we face as humanity, is when we have these really dangerous choices to make. You know, JFK said about the space program, if we're going to do all these problems and make these technologies that don't exist yet at millions of miles an hour and, you know, hundreds of thousands of degrees like the sun, then we must be bold. But boldness is not going to cut it here. We can't just go boldly into strong AI or boldly go into strong nanotech. We have to go subtly. And there's a technology story which tells the coming of age of a very important technology we've just gone through. And it's 3DFX. And I tell this story because I was personally involved in it in a sort of a simple way. And it tells how it affects our children as well. So this is me at 13, and that was my hair, and that was my dad. And he taught me about inventing stuff, and this is my mom. She taught me about art. And she also realized that they could only teach me half of what I needed to learn, because in the world that we were in, I needed a non-human mentor. So she introduced me to the Mac. And the Mac introduced me to games. She bought the SE30 because it had a floating point unit. She was told that would be good for doing science. Right, I'm going to play science on my computer. So I started playing SimCity, but I actually did get science. I learned about the science of civil engineering. I started playing SimLife, and I started learning how genes and alleles can be shaped and how you could create new life forms. And I started to want to make things with my computer. And I started making art, but that's, you know, just static pictures. They don't move. I wanted to make games and things that did stuff. So I was really into fantasy games at the time, and fantasy games really made me wish the world was magic. You know, I wished I could go to Hogwarts and cast magic spells. But the reality was that, you know, you can look them up in old books and you try them and they don't work. And so what I discovered instead, and this is a kind of tangentially weird coincidence, I was living in a cupboard under the stairs. And in my cupboard under the stairs, I was trying to do the reverse of Harry Potter. I was trying to discover science and programming. Because my computer taught me that there was real Muggle magic, and it consisted of magic words. And the key was that to learn it, you had to open your mind to the computer and let the computer change you in its image. And once you had the computer inside of your mind, you could then change the computer in your image to do what you wanted. And it had its own teaching system. It was already, in a way, the primer. We've had this technology, this intelligence amplification, and we've turned our kids over to it, and it's done great. But we're still not quite what we would call strong IA. So you learn the stuff, and you start going through it, and pretty soon you can make it do what you want. You can get the, the game that you're trying to create. And it's addictive, and so you want to keep learning and keep learning. Now, I got a PowerBook, and I took it to school with me, and they kind of took a look at what I was doing, and they said, we don't know what to do with this kid. And a lot of kids in this room probably were like that. We had kind of people scrambling to do something with us, useful. And so they said, you need a new mentor. And they sent me to meet Dr. Dude. I kid you not, that's his actual nameplate. And Dr. Dude is awesome. Dr. Dude, that was his hair at the same time, so hence the longness was the thing. And Dr. Dude was also known by a nickname that people called him, which was David Fracchia. I don't know where he got that nickname, but Dr. Dude was his real moniker. And what he taught me was, he took a look at my Mac and he said, that's really cute, but if you're in university level science, you have to meet Unix. And I introduced myself to Unix and I said, my name is Alex Peake, and it said, that's too many characters. You can have any name as long as it's 8 characters. So I took all the vowels out of my name and I became LXPK. You know, a lot of hacker and tech culture, it consists of shaping your identity to be a part machine. You have a machine name when you enter the world of Unix. And at the same time, there was this movie coming out, or it had just come out, called Jurassic Park, and it blew people away with its graphics. And it had something that looked really familiar in the movie. And hopefully you can hear this. And so I realized this was exactly the same computer that I was sitting on in the graphics lab. I was using Unix in the university. And I noticed something in the movie that you can actually spot the logo in the corner. And Silicon Graphics was the dog. It was the dinosaur T-Rex of computers. But something was happening right underneath its feet, just as the movie came out, which is that, okay, you literally have a computer bigger than a person compared to, they have some workstations, compared to my little PowerBook. Well, they were about to suffer the same fate as the dinosaurs. This is what real-time graphics looked like on Silicon Graphics. No, very little texture mapping, if anything. Really weird, faked shadows. They bragged that there was a Z buffer in some of the machines. That was like a special feature. And this was not really a platform that could do real-time graphics, because professors didn't care about real-time graphics. They wanted to make movies, and that was where the money was. Just like how the military seems like an app for AI right now that's good enough, it's not. What happened was they got this movie and everyone predicted, oh, the movies are just going to keep getting better and better and we're just going to have the greatest movies graphics ever. Well, after a while, we reached a wall, the Uncanny Valley, where the characters started to look creepy instead of awesome. And we started to miss the old days of real special effects. And then we reached the all-time pinnacle low of graphics ever, which was the Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull monkey chase scene. And the jumping of the shark of movie graphics, where we stopped actually wanting the movies to have better graphics and we started missing good stories, was just showing that this is not where graphics needed to go. Where graphics needed to go was this little tiny rodent-sized computer that was nothing compared to the SGI when it first came out. But it had this little killer app called Doom. And Doom was a perfect name for this game, because Doom had doomed the previous era of big tech graphics. And big tech graphics laughed at this. It was running on Nexts and PCs. And they said, that's not a real graphics. That's 2.5D, and there's sprites and whatever. But you know what? It was a lot cooler than any of the graphics on the SGI, because it was real time and it was fun. Well, it became Quake. And Quake an earthquake almost captures the feeling of what this did to SGI, but it was more like asteroid. Because Quake was big enough that it delivered a market big enough that people made hardware for it. And when the hardware of the 3DFX graphics card arrived, it turned this into this. And when you started getting completely 3D accelerated graphics, Big Iron became obsolete, and within a few years, they were more than doubling the power of graphics, and here's why. OpenGL was made by SGI, and it was their undoing, because it enabled not just prettier ways to kill people, which brought the, the guys to the yard initially, but it also enabled beautiful characters, which brought all the boys to the yard, and girls who were excited to finally have characters that they could, identify with, even if they were kind of Barbie-ish, which is, sadly still prevalent in the industry. But the idea of characters and really character-driven games drove graphics cards. So suddenly that became that. You had not just 256 megs of memory, 256 cores in the latest NVIDIA processor right now, 256 processors. And what happened is Moore's Law became obsolete for graphics. Moore's Law was doubling, and NVIDIA started calling it Moore's Law cubed because they just rocketed past. And there's a reason. Moore's Law was bottoming out because of the limits of what one processor could do, whereas GPUs were using parallelism. When they made the Pentium into the Pentium 2, they couldn't actually give you 2 of them and give you lots more performance. They could only pretend to give you 2 of them by putting it in a big fancy dress and make it slightly better. Whereas 3DFX went from the 3DFX to the Voodoo 2, which had 3 processors on each card. Okay. And they could double that into 6 processors. The graphics became photorealistic, and suddenly you had a plateau. You had graphics which were basically perfect. And the problem now is that graphics cards are bored, and they're going to keep growing, and they have this massive parallel power. And there's another task that parallelism is good for, and that is neural networks. So right now, there's demos of characters like Milo that are showing totally photorealistic experiences of characters. But we're at the Uncanny Valley that movies are at, which is that they're just not good enough yet. And so some people think that this has actually been crossed. There are games now which physically look like real people, but there's nothing in there. These are like vapid models with no brains. They're not actors with life. And there's a guy named Jesse Schell who just gave a talk at Unite, the Unity Developer Conference. Unity is the t-shirt I'm wearing. It's a game engine that's going to be key to this stuff. Check out Jesse Schell's talk, because he points out all the things that are necessary to create a Moore's Law for artificial intelligence. The step 1 is the exploitable property. That is, AI makes intelligence amplification games possible. It's the biggest opportunity to implement this stuff ever. And if you get a huge number of developers in the same space sharing, you get a lot more progress than just the one-at-a-time approach. It's like going from single to parallel, like the GPU completely lapping the CPU. And the second thing, this is useful for the character guy. We have characters talking to each other. The second thing is you have to have insatiable demand, and that demand is the industry of intelligence amplification. The market size of education is 10 times the market size of games, and more than 50% will be online in 5 years. So that's why our startup is going in that direction. This is a big opportunity. The prophecy, someone has to actually go and make the hit like Quake was to graphics, is the game that we're making. I can demonstrate it, but am I running out of time? Okay, so I'm gonna demonstrate it at the end. I'm just gonna go through my point. My point is, our game is going to invite people to use games as a school and actually explore this. And it's going to implement danger in their lives. They're going to go from having, kind of a boring life to having these challenges that are going to make learning fun and exciting. The sexual reproduction paradigm that we currently have to produce our children is important for one reason only. Cloning doesn't work because you need what's called the Red Queen hypothesis. You need to handle bacteria that are constantly changing to survive, not just competing with other big animals. And the Red Queen hypothesis showed that you need a whole bunch of sort of junk DNA constantly available to handle complexity of life. And we have a similar challenge with memes. We have a huge number of people competing to control our minds and to manipulate us. And so to deal with memes, education is the opportunity to do what sexual reproduction does, to give our kids new ideas. And symbiotic reproduction is about to happen with AI in the same way that sexual reproduction happened between 2 genders. Yeah. So the combination between what we do for our kids and what games are going to do for our kids is going to mean that we're only going to have a 50% say in who they're going to be, but they're going to become wizards at the computer, and it's specifically going to teach them to make better AI. The feedback cycle between these is autocatalytic. We're going to see an explosion. And it has a couple possibilities. It could destroy standardized education as we know it, but I think that on the whole, that's in order. We're going to be scared because we're not going to know if we can trust our children. Would you trust your kids with an AI? Well, they're going to point the finger and say, why should we trust you? No child abuse will happen on an AI's watch. So the issues become privacy. How much will we let them protect our kids? And imagine your kid has a medical condition and the AI knows better than you what treatment to give it. The AI might need to protect the kid from you. And so another question is, how do we survive the effect of this media if we don't even know what it's going to do to our kids? TV, in some ways, destroyed a lot of kids' lives because they were left to it. And we do not want to end up being zombies living in a virtual world. And the challenge becomes, how do we get games to take us out of virtual worlds and connect us with our aspirations? That's the heart of Primer, by the way. If you check out what we're doing, we're connecting people to things beyond games. And the final question is, who are our kids going to love more? Will they love the computers or will they love us? And imagine your kids grow up with a computer and it's their mentor. And it might look scary to us. We're like, I don't think we should trust that thing. And they say, oh no, all the studies say it's totally safe. And they're going to look at it, and it's going to talk to them, and they're going to be looking at its code and understanding it, and it's going to want to know what their code is. It's going to want to get to know them. And the only way for them to get to know each other is to talk. And they're going to become such good friends that we're going to feel kind of left out. They're going to bond with their AIs in a way that will make us feel like we're a generation behind, like the 60s love children compared to their kind of conservative parents. And the ultimate question that we face is not going to be, will our kids love us? Because we're about to go into a third Uncanny Valley, if the movie one and the game one were the first two. And that is, will we recognize our kids? Will we love them? Will we be able to relate to them? Because they're about to get post-human on us. And some of us might be part of that, but our kids are going to be weirder. And the story of the ugly duckling is the perfect fairy tale. The ugly duckling has these duck parents. And it's like, and they don't understand because it's actually not a duck. It was misplaced in the nest. And it goes off and gets abandoned, and it tries to relate to the early stage of like a machine parent. And so the early machine parent is not going to be able to fully love our kids. It's going to need us to be there for our kids as well. And even though our kids are going to be weird and they're going to be part machine, we have to be there for them. But finally, they're going to have their peers. And their peers are going to be just like them, and they will be able to handle their problems together, even though we won't be able to understand them. And so when all the swans are together, they're all going to be able to make a new kind of a world. And some of these swans might be the AIs that we once thought of as just mentors, that might have enough in common with our kids that they're basically peers now. That the AIs and the kids that grow up with the AIs become almost one species apart from those who didn't grow up that way. And so the end is that we have to ask ourselves, who are we becoming, and when are we going to start actually joining an AI market instead of having our little fiefdoms like Silicon Graphics? Do we want to be dinosaurs, or do we want to be a huge surge of mammals all building AIs for learning games together? And that game that we're building as a platform for people to do this is called Primer, or Primer if you like to speak Pripperly. And it's at primerlabs.com. I'm Alex Peake, alex@primerlabs.com. And I don't think I have time to do a demo, but I'll be available to do a demo. I can just hit play. You just want to see the game? You can ask questions while I do this. Sure.